This is Middle East Matters on France 24. I'm Hala Mohideen. Coming up in today's show, conquering the Islamic State group is only half the battle. Our special correspondents report on efforts to regain the trust of the people of Mosul. Arab Israelis are condemning so-called honour killings and the Israeli state for turning a blind eye to the problem. And the economic crisis in Egypt is beginning to bite, and it's starting to hit essential supplies like vaccines and medicine. But first to Iraq, where the fight against the Islamic State group in Mosul remains heavy-going. Progress is slow but steady. However, the battle itself isn't the end of the struggle, as the Iraqi army knows all too well. After at least 2 years of IS group rule, Mosul residents are fearful and mistrusting. France 24's Robert Parsons has this special report from Mosul.
The Iraqi army celebrates its return to eastern Mosul. The song is triumphant but carries a significance beyond its words of victory.
I haven't heard music for 3 years. Since Daesh came here, we have been sad because everything is forbidden. Everything is haram.
We're in Intisar, a district in the eastern suburbs of Mosul, recently liberated by the Iraqi army. There's still gunfire around us, but here the Iraqi army is distributing food to the local population, part of its effort to ensure that it has good relations with the locals. What they're providing is an essential service. There are no NGOs here, and none of the usual amenities are functioning. And it also helps soften the army's image.
We need food, water, electricity, and other things.
We need medicine for people with permanent disorders, just like this one. For diabetes and blood pressure problems. We don't have any.
Before they can get food from the soldiers, the people here have to stand in line to be body checked. The police are taking no chances.
We are worried that ISIS fighters might sneak through. We are trying to keep everybody safe.
Fear permeates the air. Everyone is afraid. This is a conflict that will leave deep scars for generations to come. These bodies of IS fighters had lain strewn on the ground for days. The women still wear their niqabs. Many are worried that ISIS will return. The men too.
They brought fear to our hearts. God willing, they will not come back. But everything is possible. We're afraid. We're afraid at night.
The main task for the army, of course, is to defeat ISIS in Mosul. But no less important is the battle for hearts and minds. How to convince a predominantly Sunni population that a predominantly Shia army means them no harm.
Now, the election of Donald Trump to the US presidency has sent shockwaves worldwide. As America processes the domestic implications of the election, in the Middle East, it could have consequences for the regional order and power struggle. Well, Trump has been outspoken about the landmark Iranian nuclear deal and vowed to tear it up if elected. But is this a promise he can keep? Onka Ula finds out.
It was more than a year ago, before Donald Trump had secured the Republican nomination for president, when he first stated his opposition to the Iran nuclear deal. Amidst a crowd of protesters against the newly negotiated accord, Trump was adamant.
Never, ever, ever in my life have I seen any transaction so incompetently negotiated as our deal with Iran.
His words would be repeated again and again over the course of his campaign. He even said that if he became president, he would tear up the agreement. So now that his path to the White House has been guaranteed, some Iranians are expressing their concern.
He said he wanted to leave the agreement. I don't want that.
But analysts say there's little chance of that happening.
Once he becomes president, he realizes that the nuclear agreement is the best option the United States has. He may use the nuclear agreement to pressure Iran and cause difficulties, but just abandoning the nuclear agreement, I don't think.
Logistically speaking, the United States could leave the agreement, but the nation would run into issues trying to break or amend it alone, seeing as the accord is between Iran and multiple international parties. Some leaders have already spoken out defending the deal.
I've stated this already. This is not a bilateral agreement. This is a multilateral agreement endorsed by a UN Security Council resolution. So it's our European interest, but it's also a UN somehow interest and duty to guarantee that the agreement is implemented in full.
These are comforting words for Iranian President Rouhani, who insists the United States cannot back out of the agreement. Meanwhile, Donald Trump has skirted around the issue since being elected.
But certainly don't be afraid.
Tensions look set to rise further in Israel and the occupied West Bank after a decision which could legalise wildcat Jewish settlements built on private Palestinian land. The draft bill needs to go through 3 parliamentary readings and be ratified by the Supreme Court before it becomes law. Well, the international community considers all Israeli settlements in the annexed East Jerusalem and the occupied West Bank to be illegal, whether they're authorised by the government or not. Now, her name was Dua Abu Shark. The 32-year-old is the latest in a string of Israeli Arab women to be murdered, killings believed to have been carried out by relatives. Now, after years of silence and soul-searching in the community, Arab Israelis are speaking out, not just against the mistreatment of women, but they're also calling for more support from authorities they accuse of neglecting their neighbourhoods. Norman Berstecher reports.
Standing side by side, hundreds of Jews and Muslims took to the streets to denounce a growing spiral of violence against Arab women in Israel. The outrage was sparked by the latest in a string of murders that has seen 15 women killed by relatives since the start of 2016. Having recently divorced her husband after years of abuse, Dua Abu Sharq was dropping off her children when she was shot in the head by an unknown assailant in broad daylight. Her ex-husband had repeatedly threatened and intimidated her over the past 2 years, yet after being briefly detained by police, he was released due to lack of evidence. An outcome some say is symptomatic of Israeli authorities' tendency to view these types of crimes as a, quote, Arab problem.
If she were a Jewish woman, the police would have found her killer in 2 hours.
These crimes are often referred to as honor killings, yet activists say the very use of the phrase gives legitimacy to these homicides, allowing authorities to dismiss them as part of Arab culture instead of investigating the motives.
Sometimes it's a violent husband, a divorce, and sometimes it has to do with organized crime, drugs, inheritance, land, property, or even child custody.
The most vulnerable to these attacks, Arab women, say they don't feel adequately protected by existing social structures, which are largely geared towards Israeli Jews. In addition to the language barrier, Arabs tend to feel discriminated against and generally mistrust state institutions.
It is existing in our society. It is existing in other society. What makes it different here is that sometimes we feel we are alone in this battle without the ability to use the laws to protect us, without the ability to ask the authorities to intervene and to try to protect.
Reacting to a recent series of protests, the Knesset set up a parliamentary committee to allow abuse victims to testify. Israel's national police chief also pledged to battle what he called an unacceptable cycle of violence.
Well, to Egypt now, where the pharmaceutical industry is sounding the alarm. Economic turmoil has led to intermittent food shortages, a devaluation of the pound, but more worryingly, a shortage of basic medicines. This report comes from our team in Cairo.
Today, Fayrouz needs to get vaccinated. At 6 months old, this injection is mandatory. However, this little girl must wait, as a required drug isn't currently available in Egypt. her doctor offers her family other solutions.
It's only present in the Ministry of Health offices. Or if you decide to bring it from abroad, then we can help in giving it to you.
For several months now, this pharmacy in the centre of Cairo, like many others, is seeing a shortage of their stock. Most of the medicines missing have local equivalents, but dozens of these have totally disappeared from the Egyptian market. And these are hardly the most important, according to the list compiled by this pharmacist.
Medications for cancer, kidney medication, and also drugs designed for infertile women who want to get pregnant. It's becoming a real problem. But the biggest problem is imported products, which are really essential, especially for treating cancer.
Ipeco is the largest Egyptian pharmacy company. Their medications are produced with imported ingredients, paid for in dollars. And it's this that poses the problem, as Egypt is suffering a shortage of foreign currency. The government's latest effort to support the pharmaceutical industry gives priority to foreign currencies for spending on the most essential goods.
The ministry will look into the priority, not as per the company, no, as per the urgency of the product to the patient. So the anti-cancer comes top priority, life-saving top priority, vaccine top priority, cosmetic bottom of the priority.
The recent currency devaluation was intended to restart the Egyptian economy, but risks raising the cost of production in the short term, which means creating further shortages of medicines.
And we'll wrap up the show in Cairo, which has been playing host to an incredible aeronautical display. These vintage biplanes are on their second leg of a month-long journey through Africa. The charity Vintage Air Rally will cover almost 13,000 kilometres, with the oldest plane dating back to 1928. Well, the landing at the Pyramids of Giza is the first time an aircraft's been allowed to land at that site. Sadly, not enough capacity for all 12 planes. We'll leave you with these fantastic images of the vintage planes, and I hope to see you again at the same time next week. Bye for now.